It was a snowy December evening in the small town of Harper's Ridge, nestled in the heart of Vermont. Christmas lights blinked softly on every street corner, their warm glow barely cutting through the chilling winds. The train station at the center of town was bustling with life, as passengers hurried in and out, clutching presents and suitcases, eager to be with their families for the holidays. Amid the flurry of footsteps and laughter, a peculiar figure sat quietly at the edge of the station platform, his breath forming little clouds in the freezing air. It was a golden retriever, his fur dusted with snow, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the train tracks disappeared into the forest. He didn't bark, didn't move, just waited. The station workers called him Max, though no one was quite sure if that was his real name. Max had become something of a legend in Harper's Ridge. Every year, without fail, he appeared at the station exactly 1 week before Christmas and sat in the same spot, as if waiting for someone to arrive. His presence was a comfort to some, a curiosity to others, but for most, he was simply a fixture of the town's holiday season. Anna Whitmore, the station's janitor, was one of the few people who interacted with Max regularly. A kind-hearted woman in her 60s, Anna had worked at the station for over 2 decades. She had grown used to Max's annual visits, even leaving scraps of food and a warm blanket for him during the coldest nights. But despite her efforts, Max never let her get too close. He always kept a respectful distance, his loyalty clearly directed elsewhere. "Who do you think he's waiting for?" Anna asked one evening, as she sipped coffee with Caleb, the station's ticket clerk. "Beats me," Caleb replied, shrugging. "All I know is he's been doing this for as long as I can remember. 7 years, maybe 8, always the week before Christmas. Always the same spot." There were countless theories among the townsfolk. Some believed Max was waiting for an owner who had boarded a train and never returned. Others whispered more tragic tales. Perhaps his family had abandoned him, and he was clinging to the hope that they'd come back. Whatever the truth was, Max wasn't telling. The children in town adored him, often bringing him treats or sitting beside him for hours, trying to coax him into play. But Max rarely indulged their affections. His eyes, soft, golden, and deeply soulful, always seemed to be searching for something or someone just beyond the horizon. The train station itself was a relic of a bygone era, a red-bricked building with a steep, snow-covered roof and a single ornate clock tower that chimed every hour. It had once been the lifeblood of Harper's Ridge, connecting the little town to the bustling cities beyond. But over the years, the station had grown quieter, as more people opted for cars and planes. Now, it was mostly used during the holidays, when families returned home to reunite with their loved ones. That year, like every year before, Max arrived just as the first snow fell. Anna spotted him on her way to work, sitting in his usual place, his fur damp from the icy ground. She sighed, her heart aching for the silent, steadfast dog. "I wish I knew your story, Max," she whispered, setting down a bowl of warm chicken stew. "I wish I could help you." But Max didn't touch the food right away. He just sat there, staring at the horizon, as if waiting for a train that had yet to come. As the days passed, the town grew busier with holiday preparations. Carolers filled the streets, children built snowmen in their front yards, and the station echoed with the laughter of travelers returning home. Yet amidst all the cheer, Max remained a solemn figure, his presence a poignant reminder that not all stories have a happy beginning or a happy end. One cold evening, a young girl named Emily approached Max. She was 8 years old, with rosy cheeks and a bright red scarf that matched the ribbons in her hair. Emily had heard about the Christmas dog from her older brother and was determined to meet him. "Hi, Max," she said softly, crouching down beside him. "Are you waiting for someone special?" Max tilted his head slightly, his ears perking up at the sound of her voice. For a moment, Emily thought he might answer her. But then he turned his gaze back to the tracks, his eyes filled with an unspoken sorrow. Emily frowned, her little heart aching for the lonely dog. "Don't worry," she whispered, reaching out to pat his head. "Whoever it is, I'm sure they'll come back." But Max didn't move. He just waited. By now, The townsfolk had grown so used to Max's presence that they hardly noticed him anymore. To them, he was just part of the scenery, like the snow-covered benches or the twinkling lights. But for Anna, Caleb, and Emily, Max was more than that. He was a mystery, a guardian of the station, a reminder that love and hope could endure even the harshest winters. What none of them knew was that Max's story was about to take a heartbreaking turn, one that would forever change the way they saw Christmas, the station, and the unwavering loyalty of a dog who refused to give up. The snowstorm rolled into Harper's Ridge a few days before Christmas, blanketing the town in a heavy, relentless white. The station was quieter than usual, with only a few trains arriving and departing as travelers struggled against the worsening weather. But Max, as always, remained steadfast. He didn't flinch at the biting wind or the snow that piled around his paws. His golden fur, now streaked with ice, glistened under the dim station lights. He was a statue of patience and resolve. Anna watched him from the ticket booth, her heart heavier than ever. She had been keeping an eye on Max for years, but this particular winter seemed harder on him. He was thinner than she remembered, his movements slower. She tried coaxing him into the station with fresh blankets and warm food, but Max never crossed the threshold. The platform was his vigil, and he would not abandon it. It was Caleb who finally voiced what Anna had been dreading. "Do you think he's, getting too old for this? Maybe this year should be the last time he waits out there." Anna shot him a glare. "Don't you dare say that, Caleb. He's not giving up, and neither are we." But deep down, Anna wasn't so sure. Max's devotion was both inspiring and devastating. Who could he possibly be waiting for? What was it that brought him back to this spot year after year, in the bitter cold? That night, as the snow fell harder, Emily returned to the station. She had begged her parents to let her see Max again, promising she'd only stay a few minutes. Bundled in a thick coat and her red scarf, she approached the golden retriever, who barely acknowledged her presence. She crouched down beside him, her little mittened hand reaching out to rest on his frozen paw. "Hi, Max," she whispered. "It's really cold out here. Are you sure you don't want to come inside?" Max's ears twitched at the sound of her voice, but his gaze never left the tracks. Emily followed his eyes, squinting into the snowy distance. All she saw were the faint lights of the last train of the evening, disappearing into the horizon. "Is it someone on the train?" she asked softly. "Do you think they'll come back this time?" Anna, who had been watching from a distance, stepped outside and gently called Emily back in. "Come on, sweetheart. You'll catch a cold out here." Reluctantly, Emily rose to her feet. But before leaving, she knelt down one last time and wrapped her scarf around Max's neck. The bright red fabric looked almost comical against his golden fur, but Emily smiled. "There. Now you'll be warm." Max didn't react, but Anna could have sworn she saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Gratitude, maybe, or the faintest glimmer of hope. As the storm raged on, Anna decided to dig deeper into Max's past. 7 years of waiting, surely someone somewhere must know his story. The next morning, she called the local veterinarian, Dr. Harper, who had treated Max a few times over the years. "Do you know where he came from?" Anna asked, her voice thick with worry. "Did he have an owner?" Dr. Harper sighed on the other end of the line. "Max showed up here about 7 years ago, not long before Christmas. A man brought him in, said he'd found him wandering near the train station. He was malnourished but healthy. The man couldn't keep him, so we tried to find a home for him. But Max kept running away, always back to the station." Anna frowned. "Did the man say anything else? Did Max have a collar or tags?" "Just an old leather collar, but no tags. The man mentioned he saw Max sitting on the platform, like he was waiting for someone." "Honestly, Anna, I think he's been waiting ever since." The revelation was both heartbreaking and maddening. 7 years and still no answers. Who could Max be waiting for? And why hadn't they come back? Meanwhile, Emily had been busy crafting a plan of her own. After hearing her brother talk about social media, she convinced him to help her make a post about Max. They took a picture of him, sitting stoically in the snow, her red scarf around his neck, and wrote a simple message, This is Max. He waits at the train station every Christmas. Does anyone know who he's waiting for? Within hours, the post went viral. People from all over the country shared it, their hearts breaking for the loyal dog. Stories of similar dogs, like Hachiko in Japan, flooded the comments, along with offers to adopt Max or send him food and supplies. But Emily didn't want Max to have a new home. She wanted him to find the person he was waiting for. As Christmas Eve approached, the atmosphere at the station grew tense. The viral post had attracted attention from news outlets, and reporters began showing up, hoping to capture footage of the Christmas dog. Max, as always, paid them no mind. He sat in his spot, unbothered by the cameras or the curious onlookers. Anna was torn. On one hand, she hoped the attention might finally bring answers. On the other, she worried about Max being overwhelmed by the sudden influx of people. "He's not a spectacle," she muttered to Caleb one evening. "He's a dog with a broken heart." But Caleb, for once, didn't have a snarky reply. He just stared at Max, his expression somber. "You think whoever he's waiting for is still out there?" Anna didn't answer. She couldn't. Late that night, as the station emptied out and the world seemed to hold its breath, a train pulled into the platform. Max's ears perked up, his body tense with anticipation. Anna watched from the shadows, her heart pounding. Was this it? After all these years, could this finally be the moment? But as the passengers disembarked, Max's tail lowered. His head drooped. Whoever he was waiting for wasn't on that train. Anna couldn't take it anymore. She stepped outside and knelt beside him, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, Max," she whispered, "what if they're not coming back? What if you've been waiting for nothing?" For the first time, Max looked directly at her. His eyes, so full of sorrow and love, seemed to say, "But what if they do?" The town of Harper's Ridge awoke on Christmas Eve to an eerie stillness. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world cloaked in snow that glimmered under a pale winter sun. The train station was quieter than it had been in days, as reporters and visitors had begun to thin out, disappointed by the lack of resolution to Max's story. The Christmas dog had become a national sensation overnight, but even viral fame couldn't solve the mystery of his devotion. Emily's social media post had gathered thousands of likes and shares, but no one had come forward with definitive information about Max's past. Some people offered theories. An elderly couple swore he resembled a dog they had seen at a distant station years ago. A man in New York claimed he once had a golden retriever named Max, but his details didn't match. The town was left with more questions than answers, and as the hours ticked by, the possibility of a Christmas miracle seemed to fade. That morning, Anna arrived at the station earlier than usual. She carried a thermos of hot chocolate and a box wrapped in festive paper, a gift for Max. It wasn't much, just a new collar and a little stuffed toy shaped like a train. She knew it wouldn't replace what he was waiting for, but she wanted him to have something, at least. To her surprise, Emily was already there. The little girl was sitting cross-legged on the cold platform, her red scarf tied snugly around her neck. Max sat beside her, his head resting on her lap. He looked tired, more so than Anna had ever seen him, but there was something peaceful about the way he leaned into Emily's touch. "I thought you'd be with your family today," Anna said, approaching with a smile. Emily shrugged. "I told them I wanted to spend Christmas Eve with Max. He shouldn't be alone." Anna's heart clenched. She sat down beside them, placing the gift box on the ground. Max barely glanced at it. His eyes were once again fixed on the tracks, his body rigid with anticipation. "What if this is the last year he waits?" Emily asked softly, her voice trembling. "What if he's too tired to come back next Christmas?" Anna placed a hand on the girl's shoulder. "We don't know that, sweetheart. Max has a lot of heart. Maybe more than anyone I've ever met." But as she looked at Max, his fur thinning with age, his breath coming in soft puffs that hung in the icy air, Anna couldn't shake the sinking feeling that Emily might be right. That afternoon, as the sun began to set, a new face arrived at the station. He was an older man, perhaps in his late 70s, with a weathered face and eyes that carried the weight of many winters. He wore a thick gray coat and carried a cane, his movements slow but purposeful. Anna spotted him as he stepped onto the platform, his gaze sweeping the area as if searching for something or someone. "Can I help you?" Anna asked, stepping forward. The man hesitated, his eyes lingering on Max, who was still seated in his usual spot. "I saw the story about the dog," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I think I might know him." Anna's breath caught. "You know Max?" "Max," the man repeated, a bittersweet smile tugging at his lips. "That wasn't his name when I knew him. We called him Buddy." "Buddy?" Anna's voice was barely above a whisper. "Are you saying he's your dog?" The man shook his head. "Not exactly. He belonged to my son, Charlie." He paused, his expression darkening. "Charlie was a conductor for the railway. He used to bring Buddy with him on his routes. They were inseparable." Anna's heart began to race. "What happened?" The man sighed, his shoulders sagging under the weight of the memory. 7 years ago, there was an accident, a derailment. Charlie didn't make it." A sharp intake of breath escaped Anna. She glanced at Max, who was now watching the man intently. His ears perked up. The connection was undeniable. "Buddy was on the train that day," the man continued, his voice breaking. "But he survived. We think he must have jumped out before the crash. He disappeared after that. I looked for him for months, but I never found him. I didn't know he'd been coming here all these years." Anna's throat tightened. She felt tears welling in her eyes as the story fell into place. Max, Buddy, had been waiting for his owner, for the man who would never step off the train again. For 7 long years, he had returned to the spot where he had last seen Charlie, holding onto a hope that defied time and reason. Emily, who had been listening from a few steps away, spoke up. "Does he remember you?" The man crouched down, his knees creaking as he reached out a trembling hand. "Hey there, Buddy," he said softly. "It's me. It's Grandpa." For a moment, Max didn't move. Then, slowly, he stood and took a tentative step forward. His nose twitched as he sniffed the air around the man, and his tail gave the faintest wag. It wasn't the exuberant reunion one might expect, but it was something, a flicker of recognition, a bridge between the past and the present. The man's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Buddy. I should have found you. I should have brought you home." Max leaned forward, pressing his head against the man's chest. The old man wrapped his arms around the dog, his cane falling to the ground as he sobbed into the golden fur. Emily and Anna stood silently, their own tears flowing freely. As the train station fell quiet, the man explained that he had come to Harper's Ridge after seeing the viral post. He had never imagined that Buddy, Max, would still be waiting after all these years. "He's been holding onto Charlie's memory," he said, "just like I have." Anna knelt beside them. "You can take him home now," she said gently. "He deserves to rest." The man nodded, though his expression was conflicted. "I don't know if he'll come with me," he admitted. "This place, it's been his home." Max, however, seemed to make the decision for them. He stayed close to the man, his body pressed against him as if afraid to let go. For the first time in years, his gaze wasn't fixed on the tracks. His vigil was over. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the town's Christmas lights flickered on, casting a warm glow over the snow-covered station. Anna watched as the man led Max away, his steps slow but steady. Emily waved, her face a mixture of sadness and relief. "Do you think he'll be okay now?" Emily asked. Anna wiped her tears and smiled. "I think he will. He finally found what he was waiting for." As the days passed after that tearful Christmas Eve, Harper's Ridge slowly returned to its quiet routine. The buzz around Max, the Christmas dog, faded, but the memory of his story lingered in the hearts of the townsfolk. The platform, which had once been his vigil, now felt oddly empty. For years, Max's silent presence had become as much a part of the town's holiday season as the twinkling lights and the sound of carolers. Without him, the station seemed quieter, lonelier, despite the cheerful bustle of travelers returning home after Christmas. Anna found herself standing at the edge of the platform one evening, staring at the spot where Max had waited for so many years. The snow there had already been trampled and smoothed over by passers-by, but in her mind, she could still see him, sitting stoically, his fur dusted with snow, his gaze unwavering. She let out a long breath, her heart heavy with an unfamiliar ache. "He's finally home," she whispered, as though reassuring herself. "He's where he belongs." Meanwhile, Max, or Buddy, as he was once called, was settling into his new life. The old man, whose name was Henry Miller, lived on the outskirts of Harper's Ridge in a modest farmhouse surrounded by acres of untouched snow. It was quiet there, the kind of peace that seemed to stretch endlessly, much like the loyalty that had kept Max waiting for so many years. Max had taken to Henry quickly. The recognition that had flickered in his eyes at the train station had grown into something deeper, more profound. He followed Henry everywhere, through the kitchen as he brewed coffee, to the barn where he fed the chickens, and even to the worn rocking chair by the fireplace, where the two would sit for hours, simply enjoying each other's company. For Henry, Max was more than a dog. He was a living piece of Charlie, a reminder of the son he had lost and the love that had bound them all together. But Max's adjustment wasn't without its challenges. There were nights when Henry would find him standing by the front door, staring out into the dark, as though expecting someone to walk through it. Other times, Max would sit by the window, his gaze fixed on the horizon, his ears twitching at the faintest sound of a distant train whistle. Henry understood. He, too, was haunted by memories of the past. For years, he had carried the weight of Charlie's absence, the guilt of having outlived his son. But having Max by his side seemed to ease that burden. Together, they were learning to let go, not of the love they carried, but of the pain that had kept them tethered to what they had lost. One cold January morning, as the snow began to melt and the world hinted at the promise of spring, Henry decided it was time to do something he had avoided for years. He took Max to the train station, not the one in Harper's Ridge, but the one where Charlie's train had derailed all those years ago. It was a small, forgotten station on the edge of a forest, its platform overgrown with weeds, the tracks rusted and unused. Henry hadn't been back since the accident. The pain of that day had been too much to bear. But now, with Max by his side, he felt a strange sense of courage, as though he weren't facing the memories alone. Max seemed to sense the significance of the place. He moved slowly, his nose to the ground, his tail low. When they reached the edge of the platform, Henry knelt beside him, his hand resting gently on the dog's back. "This is where it happened," Henry said quietly. His voice trembled, but he forced himself to continue. "This is where we lost him." Max looked up at him, his golden eyes full of understanding. Henry swallowed hard, his throat tight with emotion. "He loved you, buddy, more than anything, and I think he would have wanted us to find each other." For a long time, they sat in silence, the wind whispering through the trees. Henry closed his eyes, letting the memories come, not just of the accident, but of the good times, too. Of Charlie's laughter, his kindness, the way he had always brought Max along on his journeys. He thought of the bond they had shared, a bond so strong that even death couldn't break it. When Henry finally opened his eyes, he felt a strange sense of peace. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small metal tag. It was old and scratched, but the name engraved on it was still legible. "Buddy." He fastened it to Max's new collar, his hands steady despite the tears streaming down his face. "There," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Now you're home, back in Harper's Ridge." Emily had been asking about Max nearly every day. She visited the station regularly, hoping for updates from Anna or Caleb. When she finally heard that Max was living with Henry, her face lit up with joy. "Do you think he's happy?" she asked Anna one afternoon, as they sat together in the station's waiting area. Anna smiled, her eyes misty. "I think he's finally found what he was waiting for." Emily nodded, though a small part of her still missed seeing Max at the station. But knowing he was safe, loved, and no longer alone made it easier to let him go. The next Christmas, something extraordinary happened. As the townsfolk gathered at the train station for their annual holiday celebrations, a familiar figure appeared on the platform. It was Max, his golden fur shining in the winter sun, a bright red scarf tied around his neck. He stood beside Henry, who leaned on his cane with a wide, proud smile. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Children ran up to pet Max, and Anna wiped away tears as she knelt to hug him. Even Caleb, who rarely showed emotion, clapped Henry on the shoulder and muttered, "Good to see you, old boy." Henry chuckled. "He insisted on coming," he said. Guess he missed all the attention. But Max's visit wasn't about attention. He walked the length of the platform, his nose to the ground, as though saying goodbye to the place that had been his home for so many years. When he reached the spot where he had always sat, he paused, looking out at the tracks one last time. Then, with a soft wag of his tail, he turned and trotted back to Henry. The crowd fell silent as Henry spoke. "Max taught us all something," he said, his voice strong despite the emotion that threatened to overtake him. "He taught us about loyalty, love, and the power of never giving up. Even when the world seems dark, even when it feels like hope is gone, we have to hold on. Because sometimes, what we're waiting for finds its way back to us." As Max and Henry walked away from the station that day, the people of Harper's Ridge knew they had witnessed something special. A story that would live on in their hearts, a reminder of the beauty and resilience of love. The story of Max, the Christmas dog, became more than just a tale of loyalty and love. It became a symbol for the people of Harper's Ridge, a story that reminded them of the enduring power of hope, even in the face of loss. For years, the town had watched Max sit alone on that platform, waiting for someone who would never come. Yet his patience, his faith, had brought him full circle, not to the reunion he might have imagined, but to the one he truly needed. For Henry, Max was more than a companion. He was a bridge to the son he had lost. Together, they found solace in each other's presence, healing the wounds that time alone could never mend. And for Max, being with Henry wasn't just an ending. It was a new beginning, a life filled with warmth, companionship, and the quiet understanding of shared grief. The following Christmas, Harper's Ridge honored Max in their annual holiday celebration. The station platform, once marked by his steadfast vigil, was decorated with a plaque that read, "In loving memory of Max," a symbol of unwavering love and hope. Beneath it, Emily's red scarf was framed, a reminder of the little girl who had believed so fiercely in Max's happy ending. Emily, now a year older but no less curious, visited Henry and Max often. She would sit by the fire with them, asking Henry to tell stories about Charlie and his adventures with Buddy. Each time, Henry would smile, his voice steady as he recounted memories that had once been too painful to share. In those moments, it felt as though Charlie was still with them, his spirit alive in the love they had for Max and for each other. The viral fame surrounding Max eventually faded, but his story remained a cherished memory in the hearts of those who had heard it. People from all over the country would write letters to Henry, sharing their own stories of loss and hope, inspired by the dog who had waited for 7 long years. And though Max never returned to the station to wait on the platform again, his presence was felt every Christmas, a quiet reminder that love, true, unconditional love, never gives up. In the years that followed, Max grew older, his golden fur tinged with gray. But he never stopped wagging his tail when Henry called his name, never stopped curling up by the fire on cold winter nights. He lived the rest of his life surrounded by love, in a home that was finally his. When the time came for Max to cross the Rainbow Bridge, Henry held him close, whispering through his tears, "You kept waiting, buddy. You held on, and you found your way home." Max's passing left a hole in the hearts of those who had known him, but his legacy lived on. Harper's Ridge continued to tell his story to each new generation, passing down the lessons of loyalty, hope, and the kind of love that never fades, even in the face of heartbreak. As you read this story, perhaps you're reminded of someone or something you've been waiting for. Perhaps you've faced a loss that feels insurmountable or a pain that time has yet to heal. Max's journey teaches us that even in the coldest winters of our lives, the warmth of love can find us, often in ways we least expect. And when it does, it can change everything. So, this Christmas, let Max's story be a beacon of hope. May it remind you to cherish the ones you love, to never stop believing in the power of connection, and to hold on to hope, even when the wait feels endless. Because, just like Max, sometimes love is closer than you think, waiting to guide you home.